مَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. Whatever we do, even if it was an atom, the size of an atom, if it's a good deed, we will both be rewarded in this life and in the hereafter. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved the reward for this man until centuries later. Two of his descendants are orphans now. And under the wall is a treasure. If the treasure is exposed, the people will steal it. I am rebuilding the wall so that these orphans would grow up and later on they discover the treasure and then they could benefit from it. He was a good man and he was rewarded centuries later, but he was rewarded. So this is the first factor, kindness. The second factor is piety. When you're pious, this will help you when you want to die. And piety is a shield. Piety is not only to abstain from the sin. No. Once you abstain from sins, a shield will be formed. After the shield is formed, whenever you want to commit another sin, this shield will help you, will protect you from giving in to desires and temptations. Now, this shield for some people is very thin, very weak. And for some people it's very thick. We all have this shield, but for some of us it's very thin. For example, we could never commit murder, God forbid. And for most of us, for all of us inshallah, for all the people sitting in this hall, we could never drink alcohol. This is something that we could never do. But there are sins that we might commit, like backbiting. For some people, this shield is very thick that prevents them from committing even small sins. One day there was a great scholar by the name of Ayatollah Tabrizi in the holy city of Qom. He was sitting in a majlis, in a place. A man suddenly began talking against another man who wasn't sitting in the majlis. So the scholar stood up, he was angry. He said, what you just did will cost me 40 days of fasting. I have to fast for 40 days to alleviate the sin that has just burdened me. Because I listened to the backbite that you just made. For some people, the shield is very thick. They could never commit a sin. For some people, no. How do we achieve piety? And how are we given a thick shield? By continuously abstaining from sins. Now if we look at the example of Yusuf alayhi salam, I spoke about some aspects of his life last night, but I would like to shed some light on other aspects. As I said, he was only 6 years old. Because of jealousy and envy, his own brothers, chose to eliminate him, chose to kill him. Suddenly one of his brothers interfered and he said, لا تقتلوا يوسف وألقوه في غيابة الجب. Instead of killing him, throw him in a well. And this is how we can, until eternity, we can get rid of him. Because he has occupied our father's heart. Our father only loves him and he doesn't pay attention to us. And jealousy and envy is the source and origin of many sins. Maybe 70% of the sins that we commit is due to jealousy. And this is one of the diseases that afflict us all. So they chose to throw him in a well. Under the pretext of playing with them, they told their father they asked for his permission. They took Yusuf until they reached a place far away where their father couldn't see them. They stripped him off his clothes and then they began kicking him. One would say, this is for all the kisses that our father gave you. This is for all the hugs that our father hugged you. Then he said to them that I'm your brother. I always thought that if something bad wants to happen to me, if someone wants to harm me, I have 11 brothers that would stand for me. I never knew that my brothers would eventually do this to me. They threw him in a well. Then a caravan passes by. They pull the bucket only to find a little boy, beautiful boy with a luminous face sitting inside the bucket. The brothers were witnessing the scene. Suddenly they thought that Yusuf could now tell them that he's the son of Yaqub, and they'll bring him back, and their father would realize that there was a plot to get rid of Yusuf. So what they did was they quickly went to the caravan. They said to them that this is our slave, this is our servant, who is a very rebellious servant. And he ran away from us, and thank you for finding him. They took Yusuf again. They said to him that if you dare to tell them who you are, we will kill you. We spared your life, we gave you an opportunity, but not anymore. Yusuf is only 6 years old. He said, okay. He never told them. وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. They sold Yusuf for only 20 dirhams, which was the price of a wild dog, giving the impression that he's not worth anything. You shouldn't respect him. For only 20 dirhams. Now this is the first step that was taken to eliminate Yusuf, to humble Yusuf, to degrade Yusuf. Yusuf was sold to the caravan. He is taken to Egypt. He was purchased by the queen. He's now in the palace until he reaches the age of 16. He doesn't give in to the request of the queen. The queen then says, وَإِن لَمْ يَفْعَلْ مَا آمُرُهُ لَيُسْجَنَنْ وَلَيَكُونًا مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. If he doesn't give in to what I'm asking for, he will be imprisoned, and he will be humiliated, and he will be humbled. She's the queen, she can do whatever she wants. He's imprisoned. He was in prison for 7 years. His inmate sees a dream, and the rest is history. And then he becomes the treasurer. And then after the king's demise, he becomes the king of the kings, the pharaoh of his time. Now, when the famine struck the city, people didn't know that this will happen. Only the elite knew about it. And Yusuf knew about it. He was the one that interpreted the dream. And he had saved for the famine. The first year, people didn't have food. They came to the king. They said to him that we need food. He said, in exchange for what? They said, in exchange for our farms. So he took all their farms, and in exchange he gave them food. The second year, it lasted 7 years. The second year they came again. We want food in exchange for what? For all our sheep and cows and camels and everything that we, all our animals. He said, okay. He took their animals, in exchange he gave them food. The third year, in exchange for what? For our houses. The fourth year, in exchange for what? Our slaves. They gave him their slaves in exchange for food. Until the 7th year, they had nothing. They came to Yusuf. We want food. In exchange for what? They said, we will sell ourselves to you. They all became the slaves of Yusuf. Look at what piety does. They became the slaves of Yusuf. Until the famine was over, he gave everything back to the general public. He was the king. He had the authority. Now he became the king of the hearts. He was popular. He was loved by everyone. His brothers came. فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرِفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. They didn't know who he was, but he recognized them. قالوا يا أيها العزيز مسنا وأهلنا الضر وَجِئْنَا بِبَضَاعَةٍ مُزْجَاةٍ فَتَصَدَّقْ عَلَيْنَا. We have nothing, and we are begging you. We need your help. تَصَدَّقْ عَلَيْنَا. Look at if you compare between the two scenes. In the past, they humbled him, humiliated him. Suddenly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed everything. Now they're begging their brother. And they didn't know that he was the brother. قال هل علمتم ما فعلتم بيوسف وأخيه. Do you know what you did to Yusuf and what happened to your brother Yusuf, your younger brother? قالوا أئنك لأنت يوسف. Are you our brother Yusuf? قال أنا يوسف وهذا أخي قد من الله علينا. And then he tells them the secret for his success. Why he became the king. Why he is now the king of the kings. And the brothers came begging for food. قال إنه من يتق ويصبر فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين. Whoever perseveres and becomes pious, shows piety, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him or her. And this is why I am now respected, revered by everyone. Everyone loves me and I am the king. And you guys came begging me for food. One day, as Yusuf was walking with his entourage, with his advisors, with his ministers, suddenly he hears a faint voice of a woman calling out, Yusuf, Yusuf. No one calls him by his name. He's the king of the kings. And then she calls out, Subhan alladhi adalla al-muluka bima'siyatih. Be glorified, the one that humbles the kings because of their disobedience, and dignifies the slaves because of their obedience. وَأَعَزَّ الْعَبِيدَ بِطَاعَتِهِ. Who is it? Yusuf calls out. They said to him that it's a woman that is a poor woman sitting in the street, an old woman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away her beauty, took away her fortune. She has nothing, and Yusuf is the king. Who is it? I am Zulaykha. Do you remember me? Yes, I remember you vividly. It was because of the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested Yusuf. He was cornered, but he passed the test. This was the ultimate test. Passed the test. He was successful. He passed. And this is why he became successful. إِنَّهُ مَنْ يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So piety is another factor that plays a pivotal role in making our final fate be in our favor. And if it's vice versa, if we commit sins, even the small sins, صغائر الذنوب, our tradition tells us that the small sins are doorways to the bigger ones. All the people that commit grave sins, heinous crimes, they start with smaller ones. People like Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, who was the pigeon of the mosque, Hamamatul Masjid. He always spent his time reciting the Quran inside the mosque. What happened? That one day, he says to some of his advisors, he says to them that I receive a letter from Hajjaj every day telling me that I have killed 70 of the descendants of Ali and Fatima. And even if I drink blood today, nothing bothers me, nothing hurts me anymore. He was Hamamat al-Masjid. Suddenly his life was transformed and he became the biggest criminal. Because these small sins, when our death time approaches, will weigh in suddenly. The shaitan comes and he hovers over our head. We will give in to the shaitan. He will take away our faith, take away our iman. And the third factor is glorifying the sanctities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sanctities. If we don't transgress them, if we respect them, if we glorify them, this will be a factor that will play a pivotal role in providing us a good fate. Luqman al-Hakim was given wisdom. وَأَتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةِ. You know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him wisdom? You know the reason? The reason was because one day as he was walking, he sees a loaf of bread on the floor. He picks it up, kisses it, because it's a blessing, it's a bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he eats it. This was the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him. And he gave him the wisdom that he gave him. وَأَتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the choice of either becoming a prophet or receiving wisdom from God. He chose the latter, to receive God's wisdom. The magicians, our narrations tell us that they worshipped Pharaoh. They were sinners. But because they respected the truth, they respected Moses alayhi salam, suddenly they changed course before they were killed. They were mu'mineen. فَانْقَلَبُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ, the hadith tells us. Beforehand, they were sinners. They didn't believe in God. But because they respected God's boundaries, they glorified God's sanctities, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala